Need to actually be live to do a podcast.
Yeah.
All right, that is working. Go back to this.
What the heck?
All
My phone
right.
just vibrated and I just turned it off. What's going on?
Well,
Oh,
when you do that, I will go send out the messages.
okay. Cool. My phone vibrated to tell me that OWLN show is live on Twitch.
Oh, yeah. You're welcome. Just so you
Yeah.
know, we are going
In case you
live.
didn't know, you're being streamed right now.
I mean, you're here, so I don't know why it would think otherwise.
Oh, I'm getting loop back from Twitch, I think.
Really,
That's so weird. What's going on?
because
Yeah,
mine's muted.
that's.
Make sure yours is muted.
Oh, my Twitch is not muted. There we go.
Well, it's on you, not me.
Yeah. Well, I didn't realize that. It's funny because I just because whenever you load a page on Twitch, it's like automatically muted,
Mm-hmm.
So just out of force of habit, I unmuted it.
Gotcha.
Pop out.
Okay, I got one
Got my
less
stream chat.
thing, and we should be good.
Back cap. Cams. Get Carter set up in a good spot. There you go. Stay. A little too turn. Too turn.
Yeah?
Yep. Sorry, I'm weird. It's fine.
Sorry, I'm weird. Yeah. Alright,
Oh.
I am good to go.
All right, I am good to go.
Alright, let's do a show.
Let's do it.
Well, let me first make sure I got the cams back.
Oh,
And
yeah.
not beyond, our actual Discord. That would probably help. Okay, now I'm good. Alright, let's do this.
All right.
You are listening to Overwatch League Network, The Backcap, the podcast with insight on the Overwatch League's path to pro and contenders analysis. Here are your hosts, Emily Drunk and Ren. What is up, guys, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the Backcap, the podcast focusing on the path to pro and Overwatch's Tier 2 scene. I am your host, Emily Drunk, and tonight on episode 12, we go around the Tier 2 scene to discuss the latest news, see who made the playoffs in both North America and Europe, and share our takeaways from Week 5 of Contenders. But before we get into the news and introduce you to my co-hosts, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us here tonight over in our Twitch chat as we are live. And of course, thank all of our repeat listeners that we do have. Of course, as always, I have someone here with me to help break everything down. Ren, we have wrapped up the regular season for Contenders, at least in North America and Europe. And, playoffs are right around the corner. Are you ready?
I am so ready.
Short and sweet.
Yeah. But no, it's going to be a good time. We have a little bit of a break for EU, but NA is coming right around the corner, so should be a good time.
Absolutely. So, jumping into the news this week, we do have one of the contenders team that has decided to disband, and that is Bazooka Puppies. Coming out of Contenders Europe, they were one of the teams that did not qualify for the playoffs. They finished 5th overall, and that was with a 1-4 record. And, despite having a win to their name against, Mosaic Esports, that was pretty much the only win that they got. And, their map record was identical to Mosaic, but mostly that was just due to the fact that the two had gone to a map 5 in that series. But really, right now, all of these players are currently looking for a team. And this was one of those teams that kind of were brought back from the prior iteration of contenders. And, in the last one, they didn't fare too hot as well, but, we do have to light a candle, as that is tradition around the Overwatch esports scene whenever a team does decide to disband. And, we are long past the days of having the bingo card that there used to be, where you could just, X off any team that's disbanded, because we already kind of blacked out that card for the most part, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. But it's always tough to see some of these teams go, even some of the ones that aren't quite as established as some of the major teams out there.
Yeah, it is sad to see them go, but honestly, a lot of players on that team did have a fair bit of potential, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them coming back. Hopefully, at some point in the future, maybe they just need a different team and a different composition of people, not heroes, to get what they're looking for.
Yeah, Bazooka Puppies were a scrappy team, no doubt, but if you're beating Mosaic and that's your only win, it does say that there's a lot of improvement that needs to be done, at least on that team in general. But, we are at the end of, week 5, so playoffs are going to be happening here next week for NA. But looking at Europe, we just had like the roster lock for the playoff rosters, and there were a couple of teams that did make some adjustments to their rosters. So looking at OWLN Hungary, they actually went out and picked up Emil, and that was following the departure of Finzi, who was signed last week for the Overwatch League. And for those that aren't familiar with Emil, he is a flex tank that has a pretty long history with the Tier 2 scene, having played for Mosaic Esports in their prior iteration, not the current one that didn't win a game, but he had also played on Young and Beautiful this season in Contenders EU. And then looking at Young and Beautiful, replacing Emil on that team is going to be Zany. So, both of these teams are in the playoffs, which is important to note. OWLN Hungary, when this deal was made, had already secured their playoff spot before the sign-up was made. And in the case of Young and Beautiful, they were still they were in a must-win situation. They had to win in order to get their playoff spot, which they did get. But having to have a last-minute roster addition going into like a must-win match definitely puts a lot of pressure on you, just trying to have to adjust on the fly. Now, Zany is another one of those players that's been around the Tier 2 scene for quite some time. He was on the Envision Esports roster last year. That was the one that had reached the Contenders playoffs back in 2017. And he's really been like the flex DPS player, mostly playing on the Genji, Widowmaker, and McCree overall. But, definitely 2 playoff caliber teams, 2 new sign-ins. So what are you expecting from those new sign-ins, given that they're not going to have that much time to really adjust?
Honestly, I think that the time to adjust, I mean, they could always use more time, but I don't think it'll be a huge factor for them. I believe both of these teams are going to the playoffs, correct?
Yes.
Young and Beautiful. Okay. And because of that, I mean, they're both teams are kind of in that prep mode for playoffs. So I feel like the rest of the team is in that mindset already. And Emil, I mean, all of the players are prepping for those playoffs. So going into it, even if they're switching teams, I feel like everyone is kind of going to be in that collective mindset enough where it will hopefully be a smooth transition. But I was going to mention something specific about Emil, and I'm just completely blanking on it. But the point is, I'm hoping and I'm pretty confident that they should be able to adjust quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention that there is going to be like a 2-week gap to just in order to get to the playoffs,
true.
just because there's a little bit of a grace period there. I'm not sure exactly why they went that route. I don't know if it was just they didn't want everything kind of happening at the same time. I don't know. I thought it was kind of weird, like they didn't like post the Europe schedule like during the broadcast like they did for NA. We do know all the matches, but we don't know what date that is happening. But just based off of like Day's tweet, it does seem like we're gonna have at least 2 weeks before they do go down. Now that being said, looking back at NA, We do have a new sign-in coming out of the Mayhem Academy, and they signed a former Congarna DPS player in Apply. So Apply has really been kind of like a flex player type role, and what was interesting about this is like Mayhem Academy had sent out an initial announcement tweet about the sign-in, but they deleted that whenever they posted it because like they had like a graphic made, and on the graphic itself it said like it was a flex DPS for reply. And there was a lot of speculation that happened because of that tweet that Apply would be coming in to replace Ziza on that team, but that wasn't true. So what does that mean for Apply in his position on the team? It means that he is going to act as a substitute, and according to Ziza, it appears like he's going to be a substitute for really any position on the team, which I thought was very peculiar. But he did say like maybe if Mubi has runs into some issues because he has been diving very aggressively. If he gets punished, then maybe we could see Apply kind of entering the fold. But on stream anyway, he's mostly been known as a flex DPS player, having played the Genji and the Tracer role, but he does occasionally flex to Widowmaker. So, that being said, like, do you think in that flex type role that it's the best situation to have one player that can just adapt to anything? Because really, like, we've seen a lot of people that like to focus on specific roles on the team, and if you're put into a situation where, okay, you're just going to go wherever we need you, that's definitely a lot to ask for anyone, really.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said for the benefit of being able to specialize on a certain set of heroes, or in some cases, a specific hero, even, just because it lets you really hone in on that skill and make sure that you're able to show up and show out when you're called upon. The fact that he is likely being brought in as a sub kind of might make that pressure a little bit less intense, just because, again, like, he might not be called in to fill that role, but at the same time, if they need him, it's kind of a catch-22, because if they do need him, then they could say, oh, we need you on this role randomly, and it would be a lot for him to pick up on the slack. So I think that it's definitely better in general when players are able to focus on at least one type of role, one, be it DPS or tank or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And who knows if he is going to see playtime just because he is going to be acting as a substitute. Because
Right.
we really haven't seen that many players subbing in and out outside of like a DPS role. And in most cases, that has been due to server pain.
Right.
As you do
Yeah.
have players competing from different regions at this point still, which is going to change, which I'll go into later. But in other news, something I was pretty happy to see is that we have one of our contenders team that has released player jerseys, and that is Energy Esports. So these are being made by MetaThreads, who do a lot of esports jersey designs and things like that. So you can get an Energy Pro jersey for their contenders team. And I have to say, like, I was looking at this, and they do look really nice. They are basically like red and black. There are white accents on the jerseys. They cost $60, which is pretty reasonable. It's pretty much in line with what you'd be paying with most other esports jerseys. And,
Mhm.
you're able to select your favorite player from the Energy roster. Now, that being said, like, we kind of went through the same thing with the Overwatch League. Like, is there a customization option for the jerseys? In this case, yes, you can get your personal gamer tag put on the jerseys. It will cost you an additional $10, which will, bring the jersey cost up to $70 overall. But, I was just happy to see that they did have that option, just because so many times, like, you either get one that has no name or just only the names of the players. Having that extra
Mhm.
option for the fans is definitely going to bring some more interest to it overall. But, I'm just happy to see a contenders team getting some love from some of these esports jerseys websites, because it's not every day that we get to see that.
Yeah, no, it's for sure awesome to see them getting recognized, just because, I mean, there's definitely been a lot of hoopla surrounding the Overwatch League jerseys and stuff like that lately, but like, contenders is important too. And there are some people out there that are way bigger fans of these contenders teams than they are Overwatch League teams anyways. So I think they definitely deserve to be represented on these sites for sure. And like you said, the ability to customize like with your personal gamer tag is really cool too. I didn't know. Can you do that with the Overwatch League jerseys?
I don't think they've done that option yet.
Okay, I didn't think so either. So that's why I was a little thrown off. But yeah.
I'm sure that will happen one day.
Oh yeah.
Maybe for season 2. That being said, speaking of the Overwatch League, we do have one more sign-in coming out of contenders, moving up to the Overwatch League. And this one was done by the Boston Uprising, and they picked up a player out of contenders Korea. So this kind of follows the contract termination of Dreamcasper, who, if you've been following the Overwatch League scene, you've probably heard all about this. It's been a pretty drama late in a week in the Overwatch League because of his actions, and they had announced that they have picked up Aim God, who was competing for Metabellum. So this will bring the Uprising roster back up to having 10 players, and Aim God is a support player. And this is important to note because if you look at the Boston Uprising roster, previously they had already had 4 support members on their roster, so the addition of Aim God will bring them up to 5 support players. Now, what is important to note here is that on the Overwatch League website, they actually have Aim God listed as a DPS, and I know he plays in Yada and Ana, so, I don't know what his flexibility is in terms of the hero pool, but this is a player that has played on some pretty big teams. He was on Ardiant, which was one of the huge up-and-comer Korean teams in the Tier 2 scene, before he moved over to Metabellum. And, with 5 supports, it's really, baffled a lot of the community. So, is one of the support players going to swap to the DPS role? Could this be a preparation for something that's down the line, like, say, Stage 4, when Brigitte enters the fold? Because who knows, we might be seeing a 3 support meta pop up when Brigitte enters play. What are your thoughts on this? Do you feel like 5 supports is just
I
too
do feel
much?
like 5 supports is just too much because it's just too much.
That's half the roster.
That's exactly the point. Wow, gosh, words. The point that I was going to make. Half of your roster is supports. That seems a little excessive. However, between Aim God being brought on in his hero pool and then also being listed as a DPS player on the website, I was like, oh, okay, he's probably going to be kind of flexed off of support and into a different role, especially with the recent loss of Dreamcasper. They're going to need to fill some shoes there. Big shoes. But I had not considered the triple support meta. That is really interesting, and I think that does carry some merit and is worth some thought there, because who knows? I mean, she hasn't been out for long, and there hasn't really been a formation of a meta around her, especially because she's not in ranked yet and stuff like that. But I think that could be a very real possibility, especially with the current iteration of her kit. Just because she isn't like a hard support like Mercy and Lucio and stuff like that, where she's just constantly spewing out healing. She has a lot of utility to bring, so triple support could be a thing.
Yeah, and really, when you kind of look at the roster right now, yes, this is another substitute, but it's regardless of what role, Aim God does end up playing, they really don't have that many substitutes at, the DPS role and the tank role. So that's really why it's been kind of perplexing. So I don't know how they're going to integrate, Aim God into that role, or, what DPS character he could pick up. Traditionally we have seen the supports mostly on Soldier 76, I think would be the ideal character, but, outside of that, in the past, they played the Sombra role, but now the Sombra role is kind of shifted over to the DPS role in itself, just because Sombra is a lot more active in the assassination department of the game. So
Right, yeah.
I know it's just hard to say. Well, that being said, guys, let's go ahead and kind of look back at the week that was, both in Contenders NA and EU. We will share our takeaways and let you guys know what happened. So looking back in North America on Sunday, that's April 8th, we saw Gladiators Legion go up against Grizzlies Esports. That one finished 3-1 in favor of Gladiators Legion. We saw XL2 Academy 4-0 last night's Leftovers. Toronto Esports continued their impressive run. They 4-0'd Mayhem Academy. And then, just yesterday, on Tuesday, April 10th, we saw Optic Academy defeat Simplicity 3-1. Fusion University did what they always do, taking a team to a Met 5, defeated Envision Esports 3-2, and then what was a much closer series than anyone could have possibly predicted, we saw Energy Esports defeat by week 3-2. So, there's definitely some things that we need to talk about, and I know there's one hero that you've been wanting to talk about, that being Junkrat. So what's going on with Junkrat right now that's kind of, I don't know if it's been irking you or if you just want to bring something to the forefront. So what is it about Junkrat that has you foaming at the mouth right now?
I can't say it's been irking me just because I love Junkrat. Call him what you will, bash on his low. I don't even know if I want to call it a low skill ceiling, but anyways, maybe it is, maybe it's not. Whatever, let you decide. But what I wanted to talk about was it's something that I feel it's gotten a lot of attention all the time, but I feel like it's kind of amped up more so lately. Is Riptire. Riptire is something that everyone sees pop up all the time. People are like, "Oh, it's so strong," and "Oh, blah blah blah." But whatever. Lately, people keep bringing to the argument the fact that a fight that starts or involves Riptire has a significantly higher win rate than most other fights, basically, for the team that brought in the Riptire. And I kind of wanted to talk about how this plays out in contenders and also pick your brain about the ultimate itself. This week we saw the Gladiators Legion played the Grizzlies, and Blase was off the chain with his Riptires. He was just making them super impactful and always tracking really well with them in general. But that stands in sharp contrast to the opposition's Junkrat being run by Spirit, because his ults just weren't super impactful the entire series, regardless of which hero he was on, honestly. Genji. Anyways, but that makes me want to ask the question, is Riptire actually a problem in its power level, or is it closer to being quote unquote balanced and being more reliant on whose hands it's in? Because yes, it's a very powerful ult, but there's obviously a great deal of variation of how impactful it is based on who's controlling it. So I wanted to ask you what you think about it.
Okay, so here's the problem. Most of the statistics that we have revolving Riptire are found within the Overwatch League.
Right.
We don't have the same stats on hand when it comes to contenders. So, that being said, if we look at how, Junkrat played out in stage 1 and stage 2 of the Overwatch League, because that's right now that's really the only thing that we have stats for. Riptire has proven, at least within the Overwatch League, to have the biggest impact in terms of the team fight in regards to DPS ultimates. Now, that hasn't necessarily translated all the time to contenders, as you mentioned this week, but in Overwatch League, the team fight win percentage with Riptire involved in a fight is 70% success rate, which is absolutely
pretty wild,
absurd. And, despite it being one of the fastest growing ultimates in the game, I want to say it's like 4th or 5th overall. It's too staggering on the team fight base, whereas if you have a similarly charged ult, like a Pulse Bomb or a Deadeye, those ultimates have had far less impact overall in the team fights compared to Riptire. And, a lot of this just boils down to the fact that the ult advantage in Overwatch plays a very strong predictive metric to determine fight wins. And ults that charge quicker shouldn't be able to have the same amount of impact as really something that doesn't charge quite as quick. Now, that being said, do I think it is a problem? We're seeing like varying results here. Obviously, being the tier 2 scene, we're not seeing as many big plays with the Riptire as opposed to the Overwatch League, but I think as a whole, we're still seeing a fairly big success rate in regards to the team fights when the ultimate is being used, so I think a lot of it just boils down to the fact that, when you compare it to, let's say you are using a Riptire going into a Transcendence, well, that's really not going to do anything because it's just going to blow right through that. So maybe if it couldn't do that, we would start to see the effectiveness of Riptire, fall down a little bit just because of how prominent Zenyatta is in the meta. But I don't think, at least on the contenders meta right now, and just due to the fact that Junkrat is still kind of situational, I think it's fine the way it is in its current iteration. I don't think
Okay.
it's being like completely blown out of proportion, but Junkrat is just one of those players that does kind of irk people because, you mentioned the skill ceiling, and, for a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, he just spams. But, that's not to say that we haven't seen Riptires being able to be shut down because we've seen that on both
Oh yeah.
levels, whether it's Tier 2 or the Overwatch League. So I think it's all right the way it is. I don't think we need to see, like, any major changes to the ability in itself.
Okay. Cool. That was what I was going to follow up with was if it should be changed in your opinion, how so? Because I've heard people mention like, oh, it needs to take longer to charge or just reduce the damage or whatever. But um, like you said, especially in contenders, I mean, with the inconsistency and how it's used, I think that it's fine. So cool.
All right, well, moving on, we have to talk about energy and bye week. I mean, that was such a near collapse against Free Win. I mean, I almost got to dispel the meme of that name for bye week. We were so close. I was really pulling for them, but sure
Yeah.
enough, energy came through. But yeah, needless to say, the season of contenders had not been kind to bye week. They were entering week 5 against Energy, still seeking their first map win of the season. And sure enough, they put up 2 map points against Energy. It went to a 5th map. And, it's worth them, like, we're at the end of the season at this point for the regular season. And, bye week didn't have a chance to get back into the swing of things and get into contention. Energy was still playing for their spot, albeit they were basically playing for their seeding at that point. But it really did make you kind of question, well, where was this bye week, the other 4 weeks of the regular season? Because, bye week, initially we're kind of like dead set on running that quad tank strat that just wasn't really paying dividends, and a lot of people were already working around it, and they didn't really decide to show that much flexibility in their team compositions. And we kind of saw the effect that it did because they finally got a map win, but it took 5 games in order to get to that point. And I have to say it as someone that has followed Energy esports for a long time in the Overwatch scene. Losing to bye week would have been something the old Energy would have done, so I'm glad they didn't go back to their former um I don't know if I should say lack of glory, but I'm glad they didn't like stay true to the meme of Energy esports. So I was happy to see that, but it was really good to see bye week, put in 2 map wins after not having gotten one until this series in particular.
Oh yeah, and I mean that series was just a nail biter all the way through because I was pulling really hard for bye week as well, just because I mean at that point you kind of feel bad for them, you want them to come out with at least one win in their contenders run, and they took it so far too. I mean they went to map 5 and then they went to map 3 on Oasis, so I was like, oh, how's this gonna go? And obviously NRG got the best of them in the very end, but it was very close. um but I think something that I wanted to bring up with this, and something that I am going to bring up a little bit later in the show, is NRG's roster, and how it might maybe affect how they were playing. Honestly, I don't know if they would have been able to stand up to bye week before they lost Damon. I guess we'll never know, but I mean, it was still really cool to see bye week really put him through the ringer at least. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, just speaking of map 5, so we have to talk about Fusion University. I feel like almost every week we are talking about this team in some capacity. And, you brought up a point where, they just love playing the game so much that they always decide to take it to 5 maps. So,
I mean,
what's going on with FU?
I think that's the only explanation. I mean, I think every week, has there been a week that we haven't got a map 5 with Fusion?
Yes, and the
Oh.
only team that didn't take Fusion University to a map 5 was bye week.
Oh, true. Yeah. Oh, yeah, because they got 4-0'd. Duh. Oh, that's sad. Oh, I feel bad.
Rip.
No, I don't. It's fine. But no, I mean, I think it's just kind of a meme at this point because Fusion almost every time has gone to 5 maps, and for the most part, in the past, it's been because of their ramp up time. We've mentioned this before, how they often have kind of a slow or lackluster start and eventually they kind of get their act together. And this time was a little different. They
Hmm.
had a strong start on Ilios, and then kind of a lull for the next map or two, and then came back strong on Dorado, and then eventually finished out the set with the win. But it was an interesting shift to their normal behavior, but at the same time, it's still their normal behavior because 5 maps. So
Well, if anything, it was a little bit more consistent in terms of their play, but also it
yeah,
wasn't completely a turnaround in the same sense, I guess is the best way to put it. But really, like, we look at Fusion University, and it's worth noting, like, this is one of the winningest teams in contenders right now, with one
yeah,
of the worst map records in regards to relation to their actual win record. So, there's, like, I don't know, it's just always going deep into these series, and, as I mentioned, bye week being the only team to not take them to a Met 5, and I think it's really important to note that in Fusion University's case, this is a team that has been kind of plagued by those ping issues, and looking ahead at the playoffs are going to be played on land, so they're not going to have to worry about that moving forward. Now, looking back at the game that they did play this week, I'd say that maybe Beast Halo needs to take a little bit of a breather and not be so aggressive because he was feeding just a little bit too much, and Zachary and Elk had to constantly try to salvage the situation, which they did fairly well with. Zachary always getting those pulse bomb kills and whatnot, but but he needs to dial it back because he can't be playing to that extent and just feeding ultimates or just dying early on and being the first pick in the team fights. Yeah, you can't be making those mistakes when we get to the LAN environment. But all in all,
yeah.
I can't say that I was surprised to see Fusion University to be taken to another Map 5. Who knows? Maybe with the playoffs being a different play environment, that is going to change. Or maybe that will just all be for naught and we'll still get to see them on Map 5s. I don't know.
Yeah. The just real quick, the ping is actually something that I wanted to bring up for Fusion, just kind of as an aside. And it's funny because we're mentioning ping and how it might be influencing their play and how or sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. But basically, what I was going to say is that Who Are You and Alarm are their, I think those are their only two players that have been playing on a different server. And I don't know about you, but especially recently, I've marked those two mentally as some of the highest performing players on their rosters. So honestly, like moving into playoffs when they're in that land setting, I will be very interested to see and scared for the other teams to see how well they start performing without those ping issues.
Absolutely. All right. Well, making our shift over to Contenders Europe, we had another 2 days, really back-to-back days. So looking back at Sunday on April 8th, we saw Angry Titans defeat Orlis in Hungary 3-1. And then we saw a series of 4-0s. Team Giganti defeated Singularity 4-0, and Dead British Hurricane defeated That's a Disband 4-0. And then moving on to Monday, Eagle Gaming capped off their perfect regular season, defeating Mosaic Esports 4-0. We saw Young and Beautiful defeat Bazooka Puppies 3-1. And in what was I would say the definite game of the week across the board, we saw CIS Hope defeat Copenhagen Flames 2-1. So, looking at Eagle Gaming, we were feeling pretty confident, going up against Mosaic Esports, that was a free win, basically.
Yeah.
We figured it would be 5-0. Sure enough, they got the 4-0 win. They went undefeated in the regular season. And they also finished with the best map record in Europe. Now, that being said, their path does not get any easier when it comes to the playoffs because, looking back at the regular season, they did have one of the softer schedules outside of one of the closer series, which was, again, against CIS Hope, which they ended up winning that series 2-1 over CIS. But, looking at the playoffs, at the bracket, which we don't know when this match is actually happening, but they are going to be facing the defending Contenders EU champions in Team Giganti in the first round of the playoffs, and I don't know, man. Like, Giganti, while they haven't looked as impressive as, prior iterations, at least on that championship roster, Eagle Gaming at times has looked really good, but, that 5-0 regular season record is kind of deceiving just based off of the opposition that they have faced. So I don't know how confident I could be feeling with Eagle Gaming right now, just given the fact that, looking at the longer stretch of things, when it comes to these tournaments, they haven't fared as well in the long run. So they usually, well, in like the Pit Championship, they started off kind of middle of the pack and they finished there, but now they start strong, and I fear that they are going to kind of let off the gas pedal or just underestimate who they're going to be going up against just because they've been kind of coasting through at least the regular season.
Right. And speaking of that, underestimating their opponents, especially the upcoming opponent in Team Giganti, I think that that's a mistake that Eagle Gaming cannot afford to make, just because Giganti, despite being the fourth seed in Group A is, as we've mentioned before, a mess in general in trying to predict who was going to be at the top of that pack. So fourth seed doesn't really mean a lot, at least in my opinion, in that group, just because that group is stacked, especially all the teams that are going to the playoffs. That said, I hope that Eagle Gaming takes advantage of this 2-week break before playoffs, because they're definitely going to need that time to prepare.
Absolutely. And, going back to that CIS Hope game this week against Copenhagen Flames, like, there is so much that we can talk about in regards to some of the stuff that we did see in that. But, one of the standout moments throughout this series that was razor close was kind of like this DPS duel and game of chess that was being played between Kenzie on CIS Hope and Naga on Copenhagen Flame. So, Ren, you and I were both kind of raving about this series, so I'm going to go ahead and let you start. What were some of the standout moments to you in regards to that series in particular?
There were so many, honestly, but it's interesting because Kenzie did spend a lot of his time on the Tracer. It wasn't always a straight matchup in the DPS duel, just because Naga does have that kind of flex DPS specialization, if you want to call it that. But when they did go head to head, it was just I don't even have words for it. It was crazy. The first map is the first thing that I'm gonna bring up. Look at that. But what I loved, much to the chagrin of some people that I have been talking to about it, Opie Muffin, is Kenzie pulling out that Mei on Ilios. That was so cool. Like, seeing Mei played in the context of Lighthouse, and just whenever Naga was coming up to these windows in the Lighthouse structure on the Pharah, Kenzie's just like, "Oh, I'm gonna slap a wall in your face. You got to go around. Sorry, buddy." It was just like, not crazy level gameplay, but just a nice strategy and a nice change of pace. So I really appreciated that moment. But I mean, like you said, there are just so many standout moments. So, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but what were some of the ones that caught your eye?
All right, well, just kind of going back to the Pharah Mei battle that was going on, what was cool about that was, like, that's something that we haven't really seen. So CISO basically came out with the triple tank lineup with the Lucios and Yada, I think it was, or maybe it was I can't remember exactly. Regardless, it was 3 tanks, 2 supports, and the Mei. And, traditionally we see, the McCree being brought out, or just a mere Pharah on the opposition to deal with the other Pharah, which we didn't get, and it just completely threw Copenhagen Flames off, and, Naga just didn't have an answer for it. He seemed pretty, he wanted to stick to his guns on the Pharah. It didn't work. He had to keep, gliding over to try to get to the next window, but by the time he got there, wrapping around the building, the ice wall would be back up, so it would just go right back up and be built by Kenzie, which was hilarious, but, what was cool, about that Ilios map in particular was, we started off and it was, Tracer v Tracer, and then, one of them was getting hot, and then we'd see, Naga, switch to McCree, or, it was Tracer v Widow, and then you'd have the other one switch to the Widow to do the duel, so it was not only mirror matches, but we saw, hard counters, and we just saw, interesting techs, like the Mei, that, it was really a stand-up moment. And, when I look at series, that is the type of stuff that I like to see. It's these teams that are bringing out, different looks that the other team just isn't expecting, and it's really just a game of, one-upsmanship, basically. Because you have 2 players that are going head-to-head, and you know that they have been kind of, the glue to the team at that point. Because Naga on McCree on Ilios was pretty ridiculous. I wouldn't say it was, Pine level on Ilios, but it was definitely a standout moment,
Yeah, it was
and
close.
both of those players came out of this series looking like absolute superstars, and really like both like you can't say enough about either player in that situation. And it was a really close series overall, and my player of the week is going to go to someone that was involved in this match, but spoilers, it actually wasn't to one of them. So there were some other factors that did come into play, but if you guys did
Actually,
not check out the series, I highly recommend it. I know, I posted it in our OWLN staff chat because, Spider does love playing May, and I'm like, you need to see this because that's not something that we get to see every day. Normally, May is very situational. We sometimes see
mhm,
it on like the command center and very like tech times, really. I mean, Temple of Anubis just to
right.
get people to the top ground, but like nothing to that level.
Yeah, no, it was just a super entertaining series from head to toe. I mean, we talked about Ilios a lot, but honestly, like Totem said, if you guys didn't catch that match, you definitely should watch it. There were so many good moments. I mean, Naga was coming out strong on the Genji and the McCree, even into Hanamura. I mean, some sick plays. So definitely, definitely catch it.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, we are going to be moving into the playoffs here, and it's going to start with, the North American side, and then we'll go into Europe. But, we're a couple weeks out, from Europe, so we don't really know what the schedule is going to look like. So for now, I'm just going to acknowledge the bracket, or at least the matches for Europe, before we share our thoughts on what we expect to see out of North America. So looking at the EU playoffs, which are going to start later. We have British Hurricane going up against Young and Beautiful. We have OWLN Hungary going up against CIS Hope. Eagle Gaiman, as we mentioned, will be taking on the defending champs Team Giganti, and then Copenhagen Flames have a pretty tough match for their first round up against Angry Titans. So all in all, some pretty intriguing matches there. So I just, early prediction: who are you favoring to take the EU title? Is there one team in particular that you think stands above the rest, or is this like always, just too close of a field to call at this point?
Honestly, it's so close. It's funny. As soon as that question left your lips, I was trying to come up with an answer, and three teams popped into my head right away. So I'm not even gonna try right now. Hopefully, we'll be able to start narrowing it down as playoffs go on, though.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I think the three. I'm trying to think, like, who I would consider favorites. I think the team I'm going to be rooting for is AS Hope. I think, all in
Hmm.
all, they've given us the most looks in terms of flexibility. Wilson Hungry, that's another really tough team. So I could see either one of those teams taking it. So whoever wins that one could be taking the title. But we
Yeah.
gotta see how some of these other teams play on the land environment. British Hurricane have been looking pretty darn good. I'm expecting good things from them. But Angry the Titans has kind of been like that team that's always in the thick of things, and they were pretty
Hmm.
close to having one of the best map records and just records overall. So you can't
Yeah.
really sleep on them either. So really, like, this is really just one of those things. Like in prior like contenders for Europe, like I honestly don't know which way the dominoes are going to fall in this one. But you know, looking at some of the outsiders looking in, like Copenhagen Flames have been playing some of the better teams very close, but they've been losing to, some of the other top teams as well. So I feel like that's going to be one of those teams that is going to have a lot to prove here in the playoffs if they're going to try to make a run of things.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the first thing you said too, between Orgos and Hungary and CIS Hope, that first game, or not the first game of the playoffs, but that game between them is probably going to give us a very good telltale of how the rest of the playoffs might go, because I definitely would project both of them to be performing very well. So the fact that they go head to head right in that first playoffs round will hopefully tell us a lot, but we'll see.
Absolutely. All right. Well, looking at NA, we do have the schedule for the playoffs. So on 4/15, which is I didn't even remember.
Sunday,
Right. So
I think.
Sunday and Tuesday are going to be the playoff days. So on
Yes.
Sunday we have Energy Esports taking on Toronto Esports. Then we will have Envision Esports taking on Excel 2 Academy, and then on Tuesday we'll see Fusion University try to not take Mayhem Academy to a game 5. And we will have Gladiators Legion going up against Optic Academy. Okay, so, let's just take this from the top. Energy Esports versus Toronto Esports. Energy has been... I wouldn't say they've been one of the more consistent teams, but their Tracer play has definitely been a standout moment. And Toronto Esports, I think, all in all, have looked the most impressive.
Oh yeah.
I would say out of any team in contenders so far. So, they've already been playing locally together for the most part, at least very recently, but the majority of the team was in Toronto. So, them moving to, a LAN environment isn't really going to be that much difference for the team. So, you would have to kind of give the edge to them either way just based on that alone.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that Toronto's infrastructure and having the already being used to playing together in the same location will definitely only benefit them. And NRG, as I kind of mentioned before, this is what I was going to bring up here in the playoffs section, is the fact that they just lost Damon and are still, I feel like, trying to recover from that. Hence their struggle against bye week. Might not work out so well for them in this first playoffs game. So I would definitely give this one to Toronto.
All right, well, looking at that second game, we have Envision Esports going up against XL2 Academy. And, XL2 Academy, if we look at ping differentials, I think that's been one of the teams that has been affected the most. So, we could finally see Flower and Nenny being paired together. We're not always seeing Pikachu paired with one or the other. Do you think that is going to play a major role in the outcome of this match in particular?
I don't, honestly. Envision and XL2 have both been performing really well in general. I honestly, I just don't think that the ping is going to be that big of a factor that it's going to allow XL2 to be leaps and bounds ahead of where Envision Esports is.
Yeah, kind of looking back, we've had Envision drop a series to Fusion University, so that's one of the playoff teams. They also lost to Energy Esports. And, Fusion University is one of those teams that they've dropped multiple games to as well. So, I really, hesitate to really pull for Envision in this one, regardless of if they beat XL2 Academy. But I want to see what that Flower Nenny pairing is going to look like on LAN, because that does have a lot of potential overall. But, all in all, throughout Contenders regular season, we have seen better things coming out of Envision. Looking at the grander scheme of things. But, I think this one's going to be a lot closer than people are expecting. But, is Flower going to show up? Are they going to have him play on Tracer? I don't know. But if Flower and Nenny are paired together, it's going to open up a lot more flexibility with their team composition. So that's going to be the thing that I'm most intrigued to see, is how exactly that is going to pan out. But that's definitely going to be a very intriguing matchup, to say the least. So, moving back to Tuesday, we have Fusion University going up against Mayhem Academy. And, you and I always joke about, well, okay, Fusion University always goes to a map 5. Are you expecting anything different when it comes to them facing Mayhem Academy?
No. And here's why. It's Fusion. So they're going to go to 5 maps. It is Fusion, so I think they'll win out of those 5 maps. Also, we're going to the LAN environment here. We're going to talk about the ping again. But we have Who Are You and Alarm coming in to play on that LAN environment. And I think that, if anything, that's just going to make Fusion play as a stronger team, and not having to deal with the ping is going to be, like I said, it can only be a good thing for them. So that's why I'm giving them the edge in this matchup.
Yeah, and Mayhem Academy's kind of been a little bit kind of all over the place. They didn't look that great against Toronto, which really isn't a surprise, just because Toronto's kind of been the bane of everyone's existence at this point. And they've done well against some of the lower tier teams when it came to the regular season in NA. So it's hard pressed to really pull for Mayhem Academy in this one. I honestly don't think this one will go to a game 5. I think Fusion University, like most series, because they are 5-0 despite only having 16 wins, it's probably going to be 3-1, I'd say, in favor of Fusion University. But I think that at the end of the day, we're probably going to be moving into Toronto facing Fusion University. But who knows? Anything can really happen. And to cap off that first round, we have Gladiators Legion going up against Optic Academy. So again, two Academy teams going head to head. Who do you think is going to come out on top in this one?
Oh, it's a tough call, but I think in the end, I'm going to give the edge ever so slightly to Gladiators. Optic has looked really strong throughout the season, but for whatever reason, I feel like recently they've been on a slight, ever so slight decline. Um, they do have a lot of really strong individual skill, but I think Gladiators is going to be able to pull that out. It might go to a game five, but I still think that it'll come out in Gladiators' favor.
Yeah, part of it is just like Optic Academy was kind of like, like 3 game stint there where they were basically facing three of the better teams in NA, and they came out of that going 1-2. So that is worth noting. So they would basically like win a game and then drop a game, win a game and then drop a
Right.
game. And they won the last one, so bear that in mind, but that was also against Simplicity. But, looking at the Gladiators Legion team, like, I just think all in all, like, I mean, Gods has been one of the better flexes in contenders so far.
Oh yeah.
Blase has been absolutely ridiculous at times, and that was one of those teams early on where you and I were talking like, well, this legit could be considered an Overwatch League caliber team at the end of the day. Now,
Oh
granted,
yeah.
they did drop a series, so they haven't looked as ironclad as some of the other teams in contenders, but their performance has kind of like spoken for itself. So I'm expecting them to come out on top. They won their last 2 games. They've already like beaten XL2 Academy, so they were favorites. But all in all, like they didn't have one of the rougher schedules, so that is worth noting as well. So
Right.
I think at the end of the day, when you look at that front line, I think you would still favor Gladiators Legion. I think they've shown
Hmm.
more flexibility, so I think that will ultimately be what is going to determine, just how this one plays out. But I'm not going to take anything away from Optic Academy because we've seen some really great stuff for them, and Sharp has been an absolute monster on the
Oh
DPS role.
yeah.
So I you got to highlight him in this match in particular. So he's going to be the one that like if Sharp like pops off like he has been known to in the past, that should make this one a very close series between the two. But I think I gotta pull for the Gladiators Legion in this one. So at the end of the day, though, like we gotta like lay our predictions out here. Like who are you backing to take NA overall? And I know we're gonna deep dive into this later on when we do know those next round matches, but who are you looking at as being the top dog right now in North America?
Hmm. Right now, honestly, I I know Toronto has had a great record and a great time so far, and that may carry them through. XL2 is a very strong team, but actually we were just talking about them. I think that Gladiators Legion might have what it takes to really pull through and come out as the NA champions just because I mean, we have talked about them in the past about being a near Overwatch League caliber team. They have a really strong tank line, which, in my opinion, I mean, everyone's important. I'm not going to dispute that at all, but I mean, there is a lot of potential there for their team to come through. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's there are 3 teams that are definite standouts: Toronto Esports, Fusion University, and Gliders Legion. Those are the 3
Mm-hmm.
likeliest to be in the playoffs. But I think I'm going to keep back in Toronto Esports in this case. I know like they still have a newer tank on that line, which granted he had played for them prior. I mean, they have Axiom, who's been looking pretty good on the Winston on the main tank role, but I think the consistency of their DPS line and their support line has really been one of the things that's really makes them stand out against the pack. And Cruz has had a very big impact since being picked up by Toronto
True.
Esports. And, even before he was with the team, this was a team that was doing some really great things. And those newer pieces haven't seemed to slow them down. So I think as a whole, just based off the play that we have seen and at the level of play that we've been seeing on a consistent basis, I think Toronto Esports is going to be able to ride that momentum. But at the end of the day, dependent, I gotta pull up the bracket if I still have it. Regardless, I'm not even gonna look at it off the top of my head. They might even actually have it on over.gg, so let me do that right now, real quick. So the winner of Toronto Esports and Energy will face the winner of Envision and XL2. So, okay, looking at it then, I'm going to say the grand final will be Toronto going up against Gliders Legion. I think
Yeah.
you and I are probably going to be on the same boat in regards to that. But, we are a podcast divided. But again, guys, we will deep dive into those matches once we get further into the bracket. But, always get to have some alternate takes when it comes to that stuff, which will lead us to our community corner and our player of the week. So, I had already mentioned that my player of the week was going to be out of that CIS Hope game when I went up against Copenhagen Flames. But I want to hear your thoughts. Who is your player of the week, and from what region are they hailing from?
My player of the week hails from NA. Of not of course, because I have had an Envision. An Envision pick, an EU pick, but that kind of gives away what team my player is from. From Envision Esports, my player of the week is McGravy, their resident Diva player. I think he had some of the highest kill efficiency for Diva bombs in a single match that I've seen so far in contenders, and it was just off the chain. So I was like, "Yep, this is the one. Can't dispute it." So, McGravy this week for sure.
All right. Well, for me, out of CIS Hope, I went with Sharik. He is their main tank, coming out of Europe. And, we talked about how that CIS Hope Copenhagen Flames series was razor close. We saw so many highlights out of there, but one thing that, often does get overlooked can be some of the tank play. And I'm glad you also picked a tank player. So, we had similar thoughts in mind. But, I think Sharik, out of the players, I mean, yes, I'm not going to take anything away from the DPS duel, which was incredible on both fronts. But Sharik's Reinhardt play this week in particular played a major role in that series because he came up with some of the nastiest Earthshatters we have seen in Contenders EU this season. Mostly, netting 2 or 3 knockdowns from the ultimate, and that really allowed CIS Hope to really clutch out some of those big fight moments. So, we got a lot of objectives that were secured based off of the Earthshatter land-ins of Sharik. So, in terms of impact, he was my player of the week. And, I love seeing big Reinhardt plays. It's not something we get to see every day just because he's not always a prominent tank in the meta, just due to the fact that, we do see a ton of dives. So when I do see those Reinhardt plays, it is definitely something that puts a wide smile on my face. And I hope, we can see that continued level of success with Earth Shatters moving forward into the playoffs for CIS Hope.
Yeah. Speaking of crazy Reinhardt play, I do have to give honorable mention to bye-week's Reinhardt player, Sheer Shoy, just because the game was yesterday, right? Yesterday, I mean, just medal for bravest Reinhardt, even when you shouldn't be that brave. Trophy, whatever you want to call it, ever, because that guy doesn't know when to stop, and it was really fun to watch.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, it's about that time to go ahead and wrap things up here tonight on the Backcap. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best ways you can do that is to go leave us a review over on iTunes or your podcasting app of choice. Any sort of feedback or constructive criticism is always welcomed, regardless of what show it is, whether it is our flagship show, Overwatch League Network, this one, the Backcap, focusing on the Tier 2 scene, or Heroes Never Die, which is our variety Overwatch show. Feedback is always welcome. That will offer us some insight on how we can make for a better listen experience for you guys. And we do have a game night coming up that will be on Saturday, April 21st. That will be at 7 p.m. Pacific time. So, expect another friendly, community, competitive game night with games being streamed live over on our Twitch channel, which hopefully you're at now. And I will be streaming those. I might even be doing some shoutcasting on some of those matches, so I might have more details on that. But it should be another fun night, and I'm looking forward to some more bumping my head against trying to figure out how to deal with Brigitte, since she can basically 1v1 anyone in the game right now. Yeah. I'll try to... I don't know if I'll be able to come up with something, but solo tanking against Brigitte is the bane of my existence, and I will leave it at that. So Ren, why don't you go ahead and let everyone know where they can get a hold of us over on the internet and social media, all that good stuff.
Yeah. If you guys want to email the show, you can do so at owlnshow@gmail.com. We are also streaming on Twitch right now, so check out our live streams of the podcasts on twitch.tv/OWLN show. We did hit Twitch affiliate, so you can support the show more by subscribing to our Twitch channel and get our network emoticon. So thank you again for everyone who has been watching the shows live, having you guys out there rooting us on is like really awesome, and I appreciate it a lot. If you want to catch us live, we're on 3 nights a week. We have our flagship show, OWLN, on Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific time. We have The Back Cap on Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. Pacific, and Heroes Never Die on Thursday nights, 5 p.m. Pacific. We also have a great Discord community going over at discord.me/OWLN show. And we are also on YouTube. If you just type in Overwatch League Network, you will find us. We're getting close to that custom URL, so definitely help us out, please, by subscribing to our channel. We really appreciate that. And all our podcast episodes are can be found on YouTube over there. That is it for where they can find you on the social media.
You cut out a little bit there, but if you want to get a hold of me on the social media, you can find me over on Twitter at MillenDrunkCTR. You can, generally find me talking about movies, Overwatch, esports, or just poking fun at other community members that I have friendly rivalries with, like Blazing Bob from Watchpoint Radio Prepare to Attack, and the OWL Recap. And again, guys, like my Twitch chat doesn't really have any activity, so if I am live on Twitch, you can always find me here on this channel at twitch.tv/OWLN show. And Ren, like, I know you cut out in the past, I'm assuming you just threw it to me first, so where can people get a hold of you over on the social media?
I did throw it to you first. I didn't catch the cutout on my end, so lucky there. I don't know. Hopefully it's still there in the audio. Anywho, I am on Twitter at Primal Ren. That's Ren with 2 N's. You can find me there tweeting about mostly gaming stuff, some art, the typical whatever. I also have a Twitch channel. It's twitch.tv/primalren. I do occasionally stream some games there, usually Blizzard, Heroes of the Storm, stuff like that. So catch me over there.
Alright, guys, well, that is going to do it for us here tonight on OWLN, the Back Cap. It is about that time to head out. I am going to go watch the Soul Dynasty play. Usually our podcast schedule interferes with whenever they play. I don't know how it works out. It just does, and that game is about to start right now. So I'm going to go ahead and shut up, and guys, we will see you back here tomorrow for Heroes Never Die at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and I will have Gabe from the Cavalry on the podcast, since Edinar is going to be out due to a family emergency. But we hope to see you guys soon, and have a good night. Thank you for listening to Overwatch League Network, the Back Cap. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at OWLN Show. Engage with the community on Discord at discord.me/OWLN Show. And join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday night over on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLN Show.